Shalom, this is Ronit Ziv Krieger, Education Director of the JWRP, with our fabulous trip leader, Adrienne Gold-Davis. Welcome to this webinar on building a peaceful home, Shalom Bayit. This session is part of our Year of Growth series, which focuses on Jewish values and how to bring them to life. The session is designed to be taught during the Jewish month of Elul, the month-long prologue to the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Our sages teach that the word, the name of the month, Elul, is an acronym for the Hebrew words of a quote from the Song of Songs. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. In Hebrew, that is, Ani ledodi, vedodi li. In other words, Elul is an invitation to relationship. It is an opportune time to work on our connections with others and with the Creator of the universe. In Elul, we take stock of what we've done or neglected to do. We take the time to make amends and bring repair. These relational repairs help us adjust course to being our best selves. As mothers, this is an ideal time to nurture our home by helping our family relationships shine. We take this time at the outset of the year to envision how we want to build our home and nurture our most treasured relationships in the coming year. As you plan your session with your women, think about how you can empower them. One way is to invite them to co-lead and co-facilitate something for your group learning. Consider asking one of the women to plan an activity to accompany the study session, such as a meaningful date night workshop with a relationship expert, a talk on parenting and family dynamics, a practical how-to guide to high holiday services, a visit to a local organization or a chesed activity. You could also invite a group member to host the session. While it is always important to open the session by reminding everyone that we are in our sisterhood safe space, it might be even more important to do so for this session. Talking about our family relationships includes potentially vulnerable and sensitive conversations. As part of your opening, you might decide to ask everyone to agree that the content that others in the group share tonight stays in the room and will remain confidential, not repeating it to anyone, including to a spouse or a good friend, or even not bringing it up with a person without asking them, may I refer to something you spoke about during the Shalom Bayit learning? It's a good idea to preface the session by acknowledging that everyone has ups and downs in their relationships. Talking about peace in the home is not about ignoring the chaos. There are difficult aspects of almost all relationships, and some situations that are truly painful or even damaging. Some relationships contend with mental illness, addiction, and abuse, to name just a few deep challenges. Not every relationship lasts, and there are times when it's an absolute mitzvah to divorce. As you prepare for the session, take time to consider what you know about issues each of your women face and how to respectfully relate to those, given the themes of the session. Shalom Bayit, or the more common used phrase, Shalom Bayit, means peaceful and wholesome home. Help the women translate the phrase. Bayit means home. Shalom means peace, and is often used also as a greeting. Later in the session, we'll see that the word shalom is also very much related to the Hebrew word for wholeness, shalem, which is related to the name of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. Our session is about creating a peaceful, wholehearted home environment. Ask the women to share a time they have felt a sense of Shalom Bayit in their own home or in someone else's. What were some of the elements that gave the home that feeling of peace? Given that we're working with mothers, the topic of our family relationships is of special value, and we've packed this session with a lot of ideas. However, if you have only an hour or an hour and a half, there are far too many ideas in the written session. In adult learning, very often less is more. Trying to cover all the content will mean that you lose the opportunity for women to connect, go deep, and learn from each other. As you listen to the webinar, consider what will be your priorities for your women. Perhaps you can set this topic of Shalom Bayit as a series of 2 sessions and then explore all the topics with your women. On page 4, we have a story about Rabbi Aryeh Levine and his wife. Rabbi Levine was known as the rabbi of the prisoners because he volunteered to be the Jewish prison chaplain during the British Mandate before the State of Israel was founded. He was also known as a righteous person for his work on behalf of the poor and the sick. In the story on page 4, Rabbi Levine and his wife went to the doctor because his wife's foot was hurting us. Discuss with the women what this comment reflects about the way they viewed their marriage. What does it mean to share the pain and joy of another in such a profound way that you would say that your spouse's pain hurts you? What is the line between an unhealthy codependence, believing our happiness is contingent on another, versus a healthy commitment to the well-being of another with whom we are bounded and interdependent? Split the women into pairs and read Tzipora Heller's explanation of Shalom and discuss the questions that follow. She says that Shalom is not the absence of conflict, but rather a dynamic process in which 2 people with different personalities work to become whole. Rejoin as a group and discuss what surfaced for the women in their paired conversations. What is the connection between Shalom Bayit and wholeness, shleimut? What would it mean to think about Shalom as a dynamic process rather than just the absence of conflict? When can conflict be a good thing? Building the skills and mindset that helps maintain Shalom Bayit is not only a benefit for ourselves and our families. Indeed, it can impact others in our community and the world. Read the text from Avot de Rabbi Natan and discuss the reflective questions. Remind the women that JWRP holds that when you inspire a woman, you inspire a family. Inspire enough families, you inspire a community. Inspire enough communities, you can change the world. Talk together about how your group can help fulfill this mission, creating Shalom Bayit in your family, community, and the world. Sometimes it feels like the Jewish nation is one big family. Certainly, when you go to Israel and complete strangers give you parenting advice, it feels like you're in a country full of family members. There's also a sisterhood and a brotherhood among all people. The Torah teaches that not only the Jewish people are descendants of Abraham, and that all people are descendants of Adam and Eve. What would it mean to use some of the principles of Shalom Bayit when thinking about all those living in Israel, or all those living in our communities or the world? Watch one or both videos on pages 6 and 7, and use the discussion questions to reflect on Shalom Bayit in the context of Israeli society, and in the context of your own larger community issues. The Torah tells us that the human story began with the creation of the first couple, Adam and Eve, and we can learn much about Jewish views of marriage from their story. As you read through the text and talk about marriage, be sensitive to the fact that some of the people in your group or their children may be separated, divorced, or widowed, in non-traditional relationships or might experience problems in their marriage.
In the story of man and woman and creation, we are told that man unites with his wife and they shall become one flesh. What do you think this means? How can two become one? So the word in the biblical passage is translated as unites or cleaves, but the Hebrew word used is devek, which in modern Hebrew means glue. We glue together and become one. So we Jews know that there's wisdom everywhere, and that when we're watchful and attentive, that every single person, in fact, every single circumstance, everything we see and hear can become a clarification or a metaphor for understanding God's words. So it wasn't surprising for me that my deepest understanding of this idea of cleaving, of uniting, of bonding like glue came to me from my beloved husband, who is a contractor. He explained this to me. He said, there's two kinds of bonds. If you wish to bond two pieces of wood, for example, you can do what's called a purely chemical bond. That means you slather both pieces of wood with glue and you clamp them together, and they stick. And this creates what's called a chemical bond, the glue being the chemistry, right? So it's strong and powerful, but it still can be separated. Because should the glue be a faulty batch, or should time and atmospheric conditions change, this bond, it can be lessened and weakened. This is why, to make a strong bond, he explained, you must do what's called a physical chemical bond. What does that mean? Well, simply put, you take both of the pieces of wood, but first you sand them, you rough them up, you irritate the surface in order to create indentations and little spaces within the surface of each board. Then you apply the chemical glue. And when you clamp them together, they don't just bond superficially, but they in fact become intertwined as if they've become one board. You see, by taking a bit away from one and a little bit away from the other, it allows them to interface completely. So how ironic is it, really, that the free gift at the beginning of most relationships is the chemistry and the glue of attraction. But we all know chemistry alone is not sufficient for permanent bonding. In the course of a relationship, each person is going to have to give a little bit of the other to the other. Take a bit away here and a bit away there and give a bit here and give a bit there. And in doing so, they do become as one, glued, as it were, two souls in two bodies, bonding and becoming one. When we love, as we learned in the beautiful story of Rabbi Aryeh Levin, whose wife's leg was hurting him too, we can only truly become restored to the state of original creation by becoming the one that we began with. The Torah teaches us. It says, and God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. The original human being was both male and female and separated. And the entire goal, purpose, the true glory of a powerful and strong marriage is when those two separated entities rejoin and bond and become once again the original one.
To delve even more into the idea that marriage creates one out of two separate beings, read the commentary of the Zohar and the excerpt from Lori Palatnik's book. Discuss what it means to think about the two partners in a marriage as soul halves who together form a whole. How might it affect the way that women look at their partners if they see them as corresponding soul halves? Becoming a whole is not an easy task. Each one of us is an individual within our own individual world. Relationships require us to transcend that individualized encasing. Psychotherapist Hedy Schleifer offers a vision of how to do that. She explains that the relationship is what lives in the space between our two individual worlds. If we do not take responsibility for this between space, then we may pollute it unconsciously, making the space feel uncomfortable or even dangerous for ourselves and for our children. Schleifer says that we must treat this relational space with care and nourish its health. Consider watching Hedi's TED Talk, given in Tel Aviv, for more background information. Hedi Schleifer builds on Gary Chapman's 5 love languages and presents 5 ideas that help couples to connect and nurture the space between them. Her 5 A's are affirmation, attention, action, affection, and appreciation. Read through the descriptions of the 5 A's together with the women in a way that will empower them. You could have 5 women each read one of the A's and maybe have someone else lead this part of the conversation. Then invite the women to rate the degree to which each of these A's nurtures her sense of connection. Use a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the most nurturing. Next, divide the women into groups of 3 or 4 and ask them to compare their ratings with each other. They will realize that different people have different preferences for what makes them feel connected. Encourage the women to share their list and rankings with their family members and to invite others in their family to rate their own preferences and to listen to and then act upon what gives members of their families a sense of connection. Given that the month of Elul is our chance to prepare for the high holidays and the new year, one of the core themes of the month is that of repentance, apology, and repair. It is especially important for us as mothers to model for our children how to apologize and how to forgive, showing our children that repentance is always possible and that mistakes and missteps can be positive opportunities for growth. Before reading together, invite the women to share their ideas of pathways to returning to a peaceful home. What are their strategies for apologizing and for making it easier to be forgiving? Then read together or in pairs, pathways to returning to a peaceful home, apologizing and forgiving, giving special attention to the repentance toolbox. If you will be offering a second class during Elul, you may want to save this whole piece for that session.
Why do you think it's so hard to apologize? Or maybe the real question is, why is it so difficult to be wrong? And so gloriously thrilling to be the one who's right. Do you think there's a truth that supersedes that moral leverage we get that comes from being wronged? And why do we love to hang on tight to those occasions where we've been wronged and refuse to accept apologies, even the indirect kinds that generally do come our way? Saying, oh, she doesn't really mean it, or I don't feel that sincere. Well, I wonder if there's some sense of righteousness, some moral superiority we feel when we're in the right, some quiet thrill from drawing that dividing line between good and bad, right and wrong, except the bigger truths in life are often much more muddled and gray. While no one should ever accept outright abuse or swallow a life of misery for peace at any price, most of us can certainly afford to let go of the moral leverage we think we have when we're in the right, a leverage over the person who is wrong. We as human souls, we're yearning for greatness, but sometimes we confuse greatness with being right. Greatness, as we know, is not the circumstances of what happens, but how we behave in the face of what happens. And saying and accepting an apology is one of the keys to that greatness.
When God seeks Adam and Eve, after they eat from the tree of knowledge, from which they were told not to eat, Adam and Eve hide in shame. When God asks Adam whether he had eaten from the tree, Adam blames Eve, saying, "The woman you gave me, She gave me the fruit from the tree and I ate it. Shame and blame. Contemporary research tells us these are predominant limitations to learning, healing, and wholeness in relationships. The Torah presents these challenges in its Relationship 101 story.
As we move towards Rosh Hashanah and do the work of the month of Elul, may we spend more time taking our own personal inventory than we do on others. May we find the way to apologize and to forgive, to ask for mechila, forgiveness, and to offer it up to others, as we would like to have God do for us.
When we don't blame and don't complain, not about others and not about ourselves, it's easier to cultivate joy. And from the place of joy, it's easier to be giving and forgiving. We've discussed some big issues in this session. Please make sure to leave enough time for the women to process the ideas and integrate them into their own lives. Turn on some quiet music and give the women 5 to 10 minutes to complete the writing exercise. When they've finished writing, invite them to discuss with a sister some of the issues and ideas that came up for them. Remind the women to listen with an open heart, without casting judgment or giving advice. Now it's time to end the session. Summarize the main ideas explored in the session and highlight some of the comments and questions that came up. Show the women the Try It Out section, where we have practical ideas for bringing the value of building a peaceful and wholesome home to our families. Ask the women to look through the suggestions and choose which ideas they would like to bring home to their families. Ask each woman to share one takeaway from this session. Remind participants that this is the end of the in-class time together, but the learning will go on in the Learn with Your Sister sessions. Encourage the women to schedule in their learning partner sessions. Look through the rest of the booklet with them and point out the fascinating topics to be covered with their sisters. The Jewish Philosophy of Love, beautiful teaching by Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. A powerful relationship exercise from Chaya Lester, which participants can bring home to their family and their main relationships. A spotlight on JWRP sister Jacqueline Volin. Let the women know when and where the next session will take place, and ask whether anyone is interested in co-leading some of the session with you. The topic for the next session is Emunah, faithfulness and trust. Please invite your women to join the Year of Growth Facebook page and share their learning with other JWRP sisters. If you're combining this session with a meaningful date night, talk, or workshop, a pre-high holidays practical how-to session, a visit to a local organization, or a chesed activity, please let us know what you're doing and post it on the Year of Growth Facebook page. Thank you for listening to this webinar. Please let us know what we can add to these sessions and webinars to make them more helpful for you. We're now working on the final sessions of the Year of Growth, as well as towards editing all the previous sessions so that we can offer them as a book via Amazon. So any and all feedback from you will be very valuable. If you want to join a team of city leaders and participants who volunteer even just 1 hour to offer input for one session that we're editing, we'd be very grateful. Please be in touch with Erin Kahal Ring at JWRP. Much appreciation for your loving work and for the opportunity to collaborate with you in sharing these teachings.